Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you find yourself in the world today. My name is Riyad Carey, and I'm the Global Blockchain Business Council's Senior Policy Analyst. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the GBBC and Global Digital Finance Global Leader Series, a weekly global town hall with policymakers and business leaders to hear their insights into their work, the state of blockchain, and the digital asset industry and current global affairs. Today, we have the pleasure to be joined by Santosh Misra, CEO of Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency and Commissioner of E-Governance in the Government of Tamil Nadu, and our host, Sandra, CEO of the GBBC and GDF Board Director, for a conversation and live audience Q&A on Tamil Nadu's leadership in AI and blockchain in India, and their newly released Tamil Nadu Blockchain Policy 2020. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our esteemed guest. Santosh Misra, CEO of Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency, is a public policy and regulatory specialist working in the area of emerging technologies for improved governance and service delivery to citizens. Mr. Misra graduated from IIT Kanpur and did his MS in EE from the University of Minnesota. After a stint in Bell Labs, he joined the prestigious Indian Administrative Service. He has over 21 years of technology and public policy experience. He has been driving strategic change within the government using technology. Some of the key policies created by Mr. Misra are in the areas of AI, blockchain, G2C services, digital identity, targeted delivery of subsidies, and more. We welcome your questions at any point during today's webinar and kindly ask that you submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Without further ado, I'd like to hand things off to Sandra. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyad. And it is my pleasure to be able to spend the next hour or so with our Commissioner, Santosh Misra. And I have to say, it's a delight to have you. Thank you so much for joining us during your evening. And let's kick off, because I think this is a good chance for our audience to not only understand what is going on with the government, but also a bit about yourself and how you got to be Commissioner of E-Governance. Could you tell us a little bit about your technology journey, in the various positions that you've held, both in private sector and in public sector, and how you got to where you are today, which is a pretty exciting place to be.
Yes, without a doubt. And thank you, Sandra, for having me here. And thank you, Riyad, for the generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's always a pleasure to be part of the Global Blockchain Business Council. I think your leadership and commitment to blockchain technology is really amazing. And it's always an honor and privilege to be here. So for me, things started out in a very interesting manner. I should have graduated with an electrical engineering degree from IIT Kanpur. And I went on to do my master's from University of Minnesota. And I was quite deeply interested in that time, this mobile technology was coming about and coming up. I was very interested in designing and creating solutions for mobile signaling and for mobile communication. So my master's was in digital signal processing and VLSI design for mobile communication. After that, I had an opportunity to work with Bell Labs, and it was very fascinating to work in an institution which had produced several Nobel laureates, and the work was very exciting. That time I was part of their wireless and multimedia group, and that was tasked with coming up with base station and mobile solutions and low power voice processing, etc. So it was a very exciting work of that time. And we, in fact, did quite well. We also filed several patents. And then after about 3 years of working there, I I wanted to try on my hands in public policy area, which was something which always intrigued me and fascinated me apart from technology. Technology was my first love. So I came back to India, and there is this incredible exam called Civil Services exam, which almost 1 million students write. And out of that, I think about 400 make it through in the final. It's a 3-stage examination. Probably
Wow.
one of, yeah, it's considered to be one of the most difficult examinations in the world. Uh, and it has 3 stages. So you have first first round prelims and preliminaries, and then if you make it through, then you get to write the main examination, and if you make it through, then you get to go to the interview, and after that it's a selection. And the service I belong to, which is called Indian Administrative Service, and it's so you get into this after writing that examination. You are free to choose the subject you write. So my case, it was maths and physics, so not very surprising, I guess. And it was interesting because I had got married, and my wife was also very keen on this. So both of us wrote this examination together.
Oh
And
boy.
I stood second in the country, and she stood 33rd. So it was quite nice. And so since then we have been. She chose police service, so she's in the police services of the country, and I am in what is known as civil services, administrative services, and I'm looking after this part of administration. And last 20 years, I've been in this administration in various capacities. I have worked in field, so heading a district, which is essentially heading all functions of a district, which is right from public service delivery to electricity to roads. It's a very unique. So you are kind of a mayor, if you will. I mean, that's the closest you can think of, mayor
Okay.
of a city. Except for the fact that these are large units. So I was district magistrate of one of the districts which had a population of about 3.4 million. So, and then of course you go on to serve in different departments. So I happen to be serving mostly in vocational education, and it also it's a match. So the government looks at your preference and your background and tries to sort of, make maximum use of your expertise. So I have served a long time in technology and related areas, and also in industry, in tourism, and vocational education. So this stint has been a sort of a logical progression of all my previous stints. And this is where I have been Commissioner of E-Governance and CEO of Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency. So essentially this agency is so I am essentially, the nearest I could think of is I'm CTO of Government of Tamil Nadu. So Tamil Nadu is a state in southern part of the country, and with population of about 80 million and a GDP of about $320 billion a year. It is second largest state in terms of industrialization and GDP in the country. And I am primarily responsible for all technology initiatives of Government of Tamil Nadu. And my organization is essentially to drive that technological change. So that's a brief journey of mine.
Well, I'm very glad that you explained how large actually the region that you cover is. It's actually larger than a lot of countries out there in the world.
Yeah, Germany inside.
Yeah.
In terms of population, yeah.
I really appreciate you giving us this backdrop, because my next question to you, and before we get into the nitty gritty about the recent papers that were published by yourself and the team, but I want to really talk about, you've seen the evolution of mobile technology. You saw what was potential from the early days at Bell Labs, which must have been fascinating. You see what is happening now in blockchain and AI. What are some of the similarities that you are seeing? How far do you think we are in the progression track? Do we have decades more to go? Just would love to get some of your thoughts around that.
Right. So I think we are in an accelerated zone, if you will. So the famous theory of relativity of Einstein says that if you travel fast and faster, the distances shrink. So the length shrinks with the speed at which you're traveling. And I think it's kind of very appropriate for today's time, because the speed at which the technology is changing is actually shrinking the time taken for one cycle of technology evolution to complete. So what took earlier 5 decades in or adoption and coming up to a scale where it becomes impactful, today it takes, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 years. And again, depending on which sphere we are talking about, it could be. So I think we are definitely not decades away. We are rapidly approaching the point where we need to actually, all of us and all the organizations like yours and all the thinking people of the world, we need to actually think and put our brains together and say that where have we come and how are we going to navigate this future. And nowhere it is much more visible than in the space of AI and blockchain, I would say. While there was a lot of talk about saying that general purpose AI is a long distance away, it's still a distant dream. In narrow domain, we have surpassed human intelligence already. So the pace is very, very rapid. And I think we are going to see this churn and this quick turnaround, and it poses very significant challenges to us, not only in terms of our existence, but also in terms of our sustainability. Is this the route which is going to be sustainable? So I think there is a huge amount of work to be done by policymakers, and that's why I find my role very exciting, because I work precisely at that intersection where technology and policy meet. And I think I'm sure the same goes with you, because you also work on the intersection of both. So it's very exciting, but sometimes, as Yuval Noah Harari says, it's a scary time as well.
Yeah, you raise excellent points there, and I do want to talk more about building sustainable and resilient systems and how policymakers are really truly the instruments of that, along with other stakeholders. But in order for the audience to get the background on some of the recent news coming out of Tamil Nadu, I would love for you to just give a very brief overview of the 2 policy papers that were released. It was really groundbreaking work. Frankly, I will tell you, I started the blockchain paper. I have not gotten to the AI one yet, but I will get there. But could you please explain to the audience what was the motivation behind the 2 policy papers, and just a little bit of overview of each one, and just the highlights? Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it just so happens that your previous question kind of contextualizes this policy. Absolutely. I think, and let me first tackle the AI part. So as I was saying, that the AI is going to rule us. I mean, it's already doing it. It's just that some of us are aware of it, some of us are not aware of it. I mean, every Netflix recommendation you see, every Amazon purchase or Flipkart purchase in India you do, every time you log into a website, every time you access information over the internet, the system, Alexa, Siri, whatever you're using, the AI is already at play. So it's just that some of us just take it for granted and don't pause and look, but it is deeply embedded there. And the way it is evolving is it really warrants a very significant investment of time of governments, public institutions, non-governmental organizations and civic bodies to actually sit down and take stock of it. And that's what the motivation was for our policy, because AI is very different from any of the previous technologies, and it is in the same league as genetic engineering, gene editing. I think these are technologies which are, I mean, you have to be very certain as to what you want to do with it. And given the fact that AI has posed very unique set of challenges, so I mean, we all know issues of ethics and bias and misuse, protection, etc. What it also is and that's where again I will refer to Yuval Harari's one of the statement he made in the WEF last year. He said, and before this, when I was talking to at the seminar at Swansea University in UK, I mentioned this: half the world does not have digital footprint. Now, if you have 3 billion people without digital footprint, and you have systems which decide, which make decisions about human lives, human health, law enforcement, based on the footprints of the people which it knows, then you are shutting you're shutting half the world out of this. It does not know how to deal with half the people who don't exist on the net, who do not have a digital footprint at all. How do you make sure that such systems, and these are so powerful, I compare them with tiny nuclear bombs. I think these AI modules are very powerful. Some of us realize that, some of us don't. But if we don't use it very responsibly, you will have a digital apartheid very soon. So, in fact, Yuval Harari, again, I'm quoting too much of him, I guess. I not necessarily agree with the pessimistic view he has painted, but some of the points he says are definitely worth considering. And he says there will be countries which will become digital colonies, data colonies. And we certainly want to make sure that this is an equitable world, it's a fair world. And apart from its own issues of biases and human in the loop issues, and whether you trust a system which decides for you, whether the parameters, at the end of the day, AI is a very sophisticated pattern recognition system, which is very good at pattern recognition. That's all it is. It may sound very simplistic, but that's from a policy perspective, that's all it is. So we need to really take care of it. And that is where we thought, and luckily I was researching on this for about last couple of years, and we also published a paper on this, and how do you make AI ethical, and how do you make it safe for governments to roll out. And AI is a complex technology, so is blockchain. These two technologies are hard to understand, even for very high technology savvy people. And forget about typically in the policy making, in the regulatory sphere, in the government sector, we always play catch up. While it was okay so far because the technologies were not evolving so rapidly, but now things are changing dramatically overnight. Disruptions are happening, upheavals are happening, unimagined changes of technology, unimagined the application of technology is happening. So this was the basic motivation why we brought out this AI policy and said that these are the ground rules. If we are going to use as a government any public rollout of AI policy, we must adhere to the following. And there's a very nice acronym we have given. It's called DeepMags, which essentially stands for taking care of diversity, 7 parameters, which we must, check the boxes. It's called DeepMags: diversity, equity and fairness, ethics, then you have privacy and data protection, you have misuse protection, you have accountability, which is basically explainable AI. It should be able to tell you why something was decided the way it was decided. Of course, a lot of research is happening on explainable AI. And then it should have X stands for cross geography and cross society applications. So does it work in India, and will it also work to the Bushmen of Africa, or will it also work for, I'm just taking up, because you never know. You have designed a solution for India, but these systems, and there's a very nice paper in Harvard Law Journal by Scherer in 2016, and he says these systems are, 3 characteristics of these systems are, they are discrete, and they are diffused. So discrete, DISCREET, and DISCRETE, and diffused, because you are designing a system today for India, but tomorrow somebody may use that to deliver something else in a completely different geography, completely different society, completely different cultural context. So if you are talking about human lives, if you're talking about human health, you're talking about financial inclusion, which by definition means exclusion as well, then you have to take care of it. So that was the motivation for AI. Same thing with blockchain. Again, blockchain is a technology where it's very surprising, but I think most of the governments have not really a great handle on it. They confuse blockchains with cryptocurrencies, and I think that's where the whole disconnect starts happening, and the chasm widens. So it's extremely important for the governments to understand the key areas where this can actually make a huge difference. I mean, there are tremendous benefits, and I think when I was speaking at Convergence, and I think this was the this came up in many discussions, that I mean, blockchain shouldn't become the hammer looking for a nail. So while there is a unfamiliarity, there is a apprehension in the government's mind, particularly given that the background that it evolved from a cryptocurrency side, I think it should also not become the other extreme where everybody says that, okay, I mean, we can solve every problem with the blockchain. The blockchains are great when you have a threat of an insider job, which happens in most of the government situations. It is great when you have a supply chain tracking. It is great when you want to add value to one of the very interesting cases, and I was having a discussion with some of the very senior policymakers of Government of India, was, can we use this to actually, there's a huge amount of artisans who produce very unique product. I mean, India is really rich in terms of color, fragrance and flavors, and handicraft. I mean, it's amazingly rich country. Now, when a tourist comes and he or she doesn't necessarily know or can distinguish between an authentic piece of, say, Pashmina shawl from Kashmir or a Kanzivaram silk from Tamil Nadu, how do you give that trust to that particular tourist? And of course, there are huge unscrupulous elements which actually exploit that ignorance and asymmetry in information. How do you bridge that asymmetry in information? And I thought that the blockchain is a great solution. You can actually track the movement. The silk is unloaded into Kanchipuram, into a weaver's location. It can get into blockchain the moment the silver thread comes, the moment the weaving starts, the moment the 1 meter is woven, and the moment you can track the whole thing. And actually, that can add so much value to the lives of the weavers, to the lives of the people who are buying. I mean, they will get an authentic product. So this is again not really something which you would go on to really talk great about. I mean, you talk about all these removal of intermediaries and shipping companies using it, and clearing houses and settlements, etc. But you never saw this where artisans can actually use it. I mean, millions of people can use and actually track and deliver their goods with 100%. Same thing with organic produce. Same thing. India has a huge problem that farmers, their prices, the remuneration they get for the produce is not necessarily always fair. Now, this could be a great solution to actually provide a fair remuneration to. So with that motivation, I'm sorry I'm being a bit long in my answers, but I couldn't help share this. And
this is exactly why we have you here. We want to hear all of these views. Wonderful.
So these are some of the less known and impactful applications, use cases for blockchain, which we are thinking. And that's where we brought in our policy that, okay, look, I mean, this, and what happens in the governments, as I said, they always play catch up by definition also. I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. We cannot be ahead of technology, because if the governments become ahead of the technology, then strangulation and choking of innovation will start happening. So it's,
Yep.
in a sense, it's good, but at the same time, you can't be so far behind. And the gap, as I said, we are in an accelerated zone now in
Yep.
terms of time. So you need to really make that gap closer and make sure that you understand what benefits it can bring. What are the checks and balances? Government always works in, and particularly in democracies like ours, a very developed and very rooted democracies, checks and balances are always there. So before you condemn a technology or before you have a suspicious out view of a technology, you need to understand it. So we have talked about, in that policy, we have talked about, of course, blockchain has an added complication that interoperability is a huge challenge. So if you don't lay the ground rules in the beginning, you will end up with multiple solutions within a government, which will further fragment the data. And actually, the benefit you are supposed to derive out of integration will be lost. So you want to, interoperability being a very, very significant concern, we wanted to lay down ground rules for Tamil Nadu particularly, saying that, okay, whenever you design a solution, interoperability is must. The platform you choose has to be approved by a wise set of people from industry, from academia, from private sector, from government, so that there is a well thought out, reasoned out. So you have, in this policy, we have three such committees: implementation committee, regulatory committee, legal committee. Also, you will need to, not only in democracies, there are three pillars of government. So one is executive, which is people like us, which are in the administrative and policy making role. Then you have legislature, which actually lays down the laws. And then you have judiciary, which interprets them. And all three need to be actually educated and actually brought on the same level of understanding before they actually, you can roll out any blockchain implementation meaningfully. Because at the end of the day, there will be disputes. At the end of the day, there will be laws which need to be amended. At the end of the day, you would need to bring in new laws, because we have done an analysis. We have some lawyer friends who actually are our honorary advisors. And we kind of sat down and said that, okay, if we want to implement blockchain, here are the applications where you don't need to amend your laws. Here are the applications where you would need to amend the laws. So for example, if you do land transaction, you would definitely need to amend the Stamp Act of India. So it's a very, so this policy kind of attempts to do that and says that these are the ground rules. This is how we will play it out. It also, one of the very significant and well thought out systems we have tried to say is that there is no fun in having network is the future. So if you have a blockchain system which is sitting in isolation and in a silo, it's not going to help. So we have said that we will encourage private people to come on board. And I think we were talking about entrepreneurs. So we invite entrepreneurs to actually build applications based on this and actually develop a thriving community of blockchainers who can actually design and develop these new value additions. And I can tell you tons of use cases which are just, we have discovered over the last 1 month, and it's amazing.
Fantastic. Well, look, you have a ton of questions. We are not going to get through all of them, but I'm going to start. Rajans has asked you, good evening, Mr. Santosh. Thank you for this webinar. I have a question, and this is very similar to your discussions around interoperability. And I think, India building a blockchain versus other countries. He says, how did you see the difference in terms of blockchain implementation in India compared to other developed countries? And there's another question that's similar related to interoperability. So maybe you could talk about, again, your views on India implementing a blockchain system versus how that will look for other developed countries.
Right. So I think we are just sort of beginning to unroll, if you will. I mean, India has not that, everybody has gone far ahead. I think in terms of as far as government is concerned, and where I keep a close watch, I think we are kind of similar to, I think EBSI may be a step ahead of us, which EBSI, for those, it's a European blockchain service infrastructure. So this is an approach which we have taken. It's similar approach. We said that we will build the backbone and let everyone play on it. And I think EBSI is the same thing. They're building the backbone. And I think the first phase, they had 4 use cases. One was digital identity. One was education degrees and diplomas. One was notarization. And the 4th one was something about data, I forget. I think I think Sandra may be able to answer that better, but I think they are yet to roll out that part. I think the COVID kind of derailed that a bit. So same thing with us. I think in Tamil Nadu we are building the common infrastructure. I know other states in India have done bits and pieces. They have experimented with it. I know Gujarat did for fertilizer tracking. Maharashtra was doing something about cotton tracking, and also Government of India in Coffee Board, they did something about coffee bean tracking. Telangana did some good work. They have done on chit funds, another very interesting use case. And they also tried their hands on land, but land is really complex. Unless you are someone like Georgia, where the land rights have just come about, and you have you have basically starting from clean slate. Land transactions on blockchain is particularly, I know about Indian context, and I'm sure it will be similar for other countries. It's going to be a bit of a challenge, but Georgia had an advantage because they started with a clean slate, so they could actually start off with land as well. So Dubai is doing something very interesting. Singapore has done open cert, which is essentially again education diplomas, something similar to EBSI. And what in Tamil Nadu also we are phase 1 is educational diplomas only, which we have taken, community certificates and education diplomas. So I think we are kind of there, just a bit of, someone is little ahead, someone is little behind, but we are all moving together and we're learning from each other. That's all.
Well, I think this actually leads us nicely into the question that Govind has asked. He's a resident of Tamil Nadu, and he thanks you for obviously spending time here with us and for adopting blockchain technology. He asks, what is your view on central government support for blockchain technology? I believe blockchain is going to change government services to be more transparent, secure, and reduce corruption. So could you talk a little bit about where you're seeing the role of central government versus obviously the localities?
Absolutely. So I think if you have been following what's been happening in the federal government or government of India's space, they have really put this on a high priority. If you recently we had this RAISE 2020, which was Responsible AI for Social Empowerment Summit, and I think they really gathered some really stellar speakers from around the world, and they shared their views. So AI and blockchain are on high priority for Government of India. Government of India is really enthused by the fact, again, this is another very interesting thing. India has the world's largest digital identity program, which is Aadhaar. Right. So 1.3 billion people are already there. You have one of the most marvelous innovations which has happened over the last 2 years. It's called UPI. I don't know if you've heard of it, but those in the fintech space would have definitely known it. It's called United Payment Interface. It's the real-time settlement amongst banks, and almost all banks are on board in India. Transaction is amazing. It's like it started 2 years ago. Today it does almost 1.3 billion transactions a month. Almost $40 billion worth of money gets transacted on this platform. And then you have this mobile penetration, which is India has one of the highest mobile penetrations. Right. The cost of data is really, really low, one of the lowest in the world, which actually helps in rolling out some of these initiatives. So you have this, what is called JAM. Jan Dhan is basically financial inclusion, and 50 million new accounts have been opened over the last 5 years or so.
Wow.
So you have financial inclusion, you have Aadhaar, and you have mobile, and you have this on top of that, this UPI interface, and kind of it opens massive opportunity for building blockchain applications, for building AI applications, and actually delivering huge amount of value to the country. If you are a startup, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a social activist, if you're an NGO, there's a huge opportunity for you.
Well, I have to say, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions from the audience, but you've already given the GBBC a number of ideas for how we can work with you pursuant to the aftermath of this, but there's a lot of exciting things. And I think we also need to shine more light on the tremendous work that you're doing as well as India's doing with respect to this, because the ethical, sustainable part, I'm going to come back to this now, and caring about delivering technology to help citizens' lives should ultimately be the mission, especially from a government standpoint. And the fact that it is top of mind for your government is very, I don't want to use, the wrong word is comforting. It's very good to see that governments are being very thoughtful about how these technologies are implemented. And with that, people are asking some more questions around how you get different groups to communicate, especially in government, when you have so many different departments and obviously groups that, how are you coordinating these? And so that it's not redundant work. So one district doesn't do the same thing that another district is doing. Are there attempts to sort of bring all the cats together?
Yeah. So again, I mean, it depends on the context. So, I mean, if you are talking about somebody building a blockchain application according to his or her will and someone else doing it, that will be a big no-no. So we won't allow that. But yeah, I mean, somebody takes interest in improving education system in their district, and someone trying to work on social inclusion in their district, I think both are welcome. So it's a very context-sensitive question. Communication and convincing government, by definition, government is a large body, and part of the reason we always play catch up is because we move slowly, and we move slowly for a good reason, because it needs to move slowly and stably. You cannot have quick reactions and knee-jerk reactions to situations which are arising. Except this is. It does has its own it has its own challenges, but I think I would rather have it this way than any other way. It actually helps to listen to the counter voices many a time, and it makes you wiser. It also makes you stop from doing something which is very foolish. So for example, for blockchain use cases, I'll give you an example. So we actually invited about 7 or 8 departments, and we said that, okay, here is, and in fact, we made the same presentation. We said, this is what is happening in the blockchain world, and this is what we want to do here, and this is why we want to do here. And then, do you think this makes sense? And if it makes sense, in what area do you think it makes sense? So
right,
we got very nice, list of use cases which we had not thought of. So we were going with a traditional mindset of what I had seen elsewhere, but departments came. I mean, one of the good examples I can tell you is sandalwood. I don't know how many of you would know it. Each sandalwood tree is worth $250,000 to $500,000. One tree.
wow.
Yes. So if you have 200 sandalwood trees, you are a millionaire in dollar terms. And what happens is it grows in the wild. And of course, government also allows people to harvest and raise plantations of sandalwood.
Mm-hmm.
And now the question is, when they are harvested and transported, how do you ensure that they are always legal? And it's like ivory tracking, And
Sure.
this came out by discussing with the forest department, and they said, I would like to track all my sandalwood trees. I mean, they're so valuable. And I said, okay, I mean, this seems like a good solution for blockchain to use.
Right.
So it always communicating with various stakeholders, it makes you wiser. And this thing, one last point which you mentioned about technology and inclusion in technology and ensuring. I think so it's very interesting. The technology can be it's a very I don't know how to say this. I mean, so it's like a very circular thing. So technology actually causes exclusion, but technology also comes to your aid to bridge that exclusionary gap. And I'll give you an example. I mean, we run this in Tamil Nadu e-Governance Agency. we do three things. We are the CTO for the Government of Tamil Nadu. We also do all G2G technology initiatives. So we go and counsel department and help them understand their need, build their systems, select a partner to develop their systems, and handhold and deliver. We also do G2C. So where we are, and good that we are mentioning this. I had forgot to mention this. We are basically Uber of government services, if you will. So we take these government services from various departments, 40 odd departments, put them on our platform and deliver it to the citizens through either online or through about 10,000 kiosks are there all over Tamil Nadu. So people can actually go queue up there and get their services, or they can access internet and apply for online.
Wow.
Now, and we do about 10 million individuals are delivered services every year on this platform. 10 million. Now, the challenge is, and this was very surprising, I started digging about it, and that's when I came to know we have both mechanisms. So you can go and queue up before a kiosk, and if there are 30 people or 10 people in front of you, you have to wait and then get your turn and then do it. And or you can actually go online and apply for the service you want on your own. And if you look at the use of online system, I was surprised it was 5% or 10%. So one of the things I thought was probably because awareness is not there. So we built a YouTube channel for ourselves and started posting content, how to access, how to apply online, because there might be a fear of technology, etc. So slowly that started improving. Today, that percentage stands at 20%. So out of 100 people served, 80 go to the kiosk and 20 apply for services online. Still, I'm not satisfied because I thought this should be more like 50%. People who are slightest tech savvy should be able to use this online mechanism to apply and get their services. So we did a small study with help of one of the Indian Institute of Management, Trichy. They came back and they gave us some very startling realizations, the findings. And one of them was that people are not sure. Then I realized, and this was the realization which dawned upon me, is that keyboard is not a technology facilitator, it's a technology barrier. Keyboard is not inclusionary. It's not an inclusionary device. And so now we have started looking at how do we get rid of keyboard, because if you want a service, you have to actually type, and the way they are, it's QWERTY. So for me, I'm used to typing for last 20 years, so it's okay. But imagine someone coming for the first time. They don't find. Why is W next to Q, right?
Yeah. I wonder if there's a role for voice there instead of.
You said it. So now we developed a chatbot. So chatbot started doing this. One challenge was, how do you navigate this complex government system? Because government forms are standardized and they don't take care of individual variations. So we started doing a chatbot. So chatbot started helping people to smartly answer their questions and tell them which form to fill, and etc. But then still you are relying on keyboard. So now we are working, trying to work on a solution where people can use voice interface and get their services delivered to them by applying online using voice interface. So these are some of the things which you need to do.
I love it. I think you've been fascinating telling us about so many different use cases. We already have people who have asked to please make sure there's the recording available. Yes, there's a recording available. Stephen, Jordan, there's a number of people here. Some are anonymous questions. I am so sorry we're not going to get to your, Govind, we're not going to get to your questions, but I will make sure that Commissioner Misra gets the questions. And then if you would like to contact GBBC, we'll make sure to connect you if it's appropriate. But you have a physics question, you have some more blockchain questions. But I'm going to leave you with one final question to answer. Obviously, with the pandemic that is going on, it is a challenge for everyone and anyone who's out there. What advice do you have particularly to give to the entrepreneurs who have great ideas, they're working on a company, in the middle of this challenging time, especially those entrepreneurs who are in AI and blockchain, but entrepreneurs in general, whether they're in India or global. What advice do you have to give about, surviving this whole period of time and, coming out well on the other side?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question, and this pandemic has been a very big burden on all of us, and particularly for the governments in terms of finances. Everybody's finances have gone to the gone for a six. For entrepreneurs, surprisingly, it's an opportunity, and particularly for AI and blockchain, because what has, and again, I'll limit myself to Indian context, but I think it will also be applicable for other governments as well. This pandemic has demolished a technology barrier which used to exist in governments. And the governments have become suddenly very receptive of technological innovations, which not necessarily was true all the time. So this is a very newfound opportunity. The other day, I was approached by our health department. One of they said, we have these cases of blindness, and there's a whole system which works on blindness control. And they said, I have this portable fundus examination lenses and machines which I can take to the field and do all this. But that doesn't help, because my problem is not fundus examination. We want to look at the area of the retina where the maximum vision happens. And I think it's called macular region or something. I'm not a biologist, so pardon my ignorance on that. And can you take an image of that region and tell me if that person is likely to suffer from blindness even before the onset of symptoms in his or her body?
Right.
Now, I would never have imagined a government department coming and telling me this, and this is happening today because they all have seen power of technology. And given the emphasis on people working from home, people wanting contactless, and I mean everything is going contactless, right? So there's a fascinating scope for blockchain as well. I mean, you want to do payments contactless, you want to transact, you want to do exchange materials or goods or documents without actually physical meetings. And I think there's a huge scope for you to use blockchain there. So I think for entrepreneurs, I think it's a great time to be in general. And with pandemic, the added advantage is governments are more and more receptive of technological innovations and solutions. So I think it will help.
I think you are absolutely correct on both points. And we're going to have you back in 2021 to give us an update on what's going on. Thank you so much for your time, your valuable insights. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and we are here to support you, and the community, I think, has now learned a bit more about the wonderful work that you are doing. So thank you so much. And I'm going to hand back over to Riyadh now.
Thank you, Sandra. It was really a pleasure, an honor to be with you. And I think you asked absolutely the right questions, and I think which could bring out what I had to share. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Santosh.
Over to you, Riyadh.
Oh, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined and for your insightful questions. A recording of this webinar will be made available online and shared with you. We also circulate relevant links to Tamil Nadu's policies for additional information, along with information on upcoming GBBC and GDF webinars. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.